For decades, Russia's air defense was seen as one of the strongest in the world, and for a long time that image actually made sense. Because Russian military thinking has always placed huge importance on air defense systems like the S-400 and the newer S-500 system. They were presented as the backbone of the Russian air defense. And at the same time, other systems like Buk, Pantsir and Tunguska were meant to protect the Russian Federation at short-range air defense. And all of this together was designed to create a layered, multifunctional shield over the Russian airspace. So for decades it was almost impossible to penetrate the Russian airspace. But the war in Ukraine right now shows a very different reality. Because today Ukrainian drones and cruise missiles are flying deep into Russian territory again and again. And more importantly, Ukraine has managed to target and destroy many of Russia's most valuable air defense systems. And as a result of that, Russia is no longer able to reliably protect its own airspace. So the question is, how did this happen? How did Ukraine manage to weaken a system that was once considered nearly impossible to destroy and untouchable? And what does the collapse of the Russian air defense mean for the rest of the war in Ukraine? Well, let's have a closer look at it. Hi, my name is Alexander Kortan. I'm a media manager and strategic analyst from Austria, and I'm also the founder of the German YouTube channel Geopol. And today we want to take a closer look about the problems for the Russian air defense. But to understand what is happening now in Russia, we first need to understand why air defense has always been so important for the Russian Federation. And if you look back at history, especially the Cold War, you quickly see the problem Moscow faced. The Soviet Union knew it could not fully match NATO in air power, cause Western countries had better aircrafts, better pilots and more advanced aviation tactics. And because of that, the Soviet Union made a clear decision. Instead of trying to beat NATO in the air, it would deny NATO access to the airspace altogether. So the idea in the Russian Federation and the Soviet Union was never to win air superiority against NATO, but to make air operations too dangerous and too costly for the enemy. And exactly that is the reason why air defense became a central pillar of Russian military thinking. And over the decades, Russia built massive networks of surface-to-air missiles, radars and command centers. And these systems were layered. Long-range systems would target aircrafts far away, medium-range systems would cover gaps, and short-range systems would protect everything from drones, helicopters and cruise missiles. And this approach also continued after the Cold War and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and also the modern Russian Federation saw its air defense as a central part of its military doctrine. So for quite a long time this system appeared strong, and on paper the Russian air defense looked almost unbeatable. But war has a way of exposing weaknesses, and the war in Ukraine especially does this. Because Ukrainian drones managed to hit targets behind the front lines and cruise missiles slipped through defenses. And slowly a pattern began to emerge in the war of Ukraine. But the first turning point for the Russian air defense came in 2023, when Ukraine launched a focused and systematic campaign against Russian air defense systems, especially in occupied Crimea. And the attacks on air defense system on Crimea, they are not random. Because Ukraine understood that as long as Russia's air defense remained intact in Crimea, deep strikes would always be limited. So instead of just attacking targets, Ukraine began attacking the shield itself. And the peninsula Crimea became a key battlefield in this effort. Because Ukrainian forces repeatedly struck air defense sites in western Crimea, and these locations form Russia's first defensive layer on the peninsula. And over the time, system after system was damaged or fully destroyed from Ukrainian drone strikes. But the point in Crimea was not just to score hits, the point was to create gaps. Because even a short gap in an air defense can be enough, and it allows drones or missiles to pass through, hit the targets and then disappear again. And once such gaps appear regularly, the entire defensive network starts to lose its effectiveness. And especially in Crimea, this created a serious dilemma for the Kremlin and for Vladimir Putin. Because Crimea is not just militarily important for Vladimir Putin, it is politically symbolic for the Kremlin, and leaving the peninsula unprotected would be seen as a major failure in Russia, so every destroyed air defense system had to be replaced on Crimea. But replacing these air defense systems did not really solve the problem for the Russian Federation. Because new systems arrived, were detected and were often destroyed again, and over time Crimea turned into something like a mass grave and a revolving door for Russian air defense systems. So most of the systems that went in never came actually back into service. And by 2025 Ukraine expanded this strategy far beyond Crimea. Because according to Ukrainian security officials, long-range strikes deep into the Russian territory destroyed or displaced Russian air defense systems worth $4 billion. And these losses were not limited to one type of a system, they included long-range system and also short-range air defense. And to sum it up, also radar and command systems were hit from Ukrainian attacks. And this situation had a much larger effect than many people expected in the Russian Federation. Because air defense systems do not work in isolation, they rely on radar coverage, communication and coordination, and once these key elements are removed, the whole air defense system collapses. And Ukraine had one clear target, because Ukrainian officials stated that their campaign against the Russian air defense systems opened lasting corridors in Russia's airspace. And these corridors allowed Ukrainian drones to fly deep into the Russian Federation with increasing success. And especially in the second half of 2025, this was clearly visible. Because Ukraine was able to strike oil refineries, ports on the Black Sea, military airfields, storage depots and logistic hubs inside Russia, and even targets close to Moscow were hit. And just the symbolic meaning of these strikes was truly enormous. Because for years Moscow was considered untouchable, and now that perception was fully gone. And by the end of 2025, Ukraine had reportedly conducted over 700 of strikes inside the Russian Federation, and this trend is unlikely to slow down actually. Because at the same time that Russia's air defense is being weakened, Ukrainian strike capabilities are growing fast. Because Ukraine's defense industry has undergone a massive transformation. Cruise missiles like the Neptune are now used regularly, and long-range drones are being produced in large numbers, and production continues to scale up. Some Ukrainian companies are now producing hundreds of combat drones every single day, and these drones are relatively cheap, while Russian air defense missiles are expensive and limited in supply. And this creates a dangerous imbalance for the Russian Federation and for Vladimir Putin. Because every drone that forces Russia to launch an interceptor already creates pressure, and every drone that gets through creates damage, and every destroyed air defense system makes the next attack even easier for Ukraine. And Ukraine won't be stopping in the year of 2026, and the Ukrainian drone attacks will further increase. Because Kiev launched new missile projects including ballistic missiles, and they are already in an advanced stage of development, so production is expected to increase further in 2026, and this means more range, more speed and more pressure on the Russian air defenses. So if you look at the overall picture, Russia's air defense is now facing a problem that is extremely hard to solve for the Kremlin. Because Putin has fewer systems than before, radar coverage has been damaged, crews are under constant stress or dead, and at the same time the number of incoming targets is growing and growing. So in conclusion, Russia is being forced to defend more territory and more strategic points with fewer resources. And that is why many analysts believe that Ukrainians' air campaign will intensify in 2026 and will get more successful. And Russia's once feared air defense may no longer be able to keep up with the pace of Ukrainian attacks. But now, of course, it's your turn. Let me know what you think about the problems in the Russian air defense, and let me know what you think about the new Ukrainian attacks. Will Kiev be able to intensify their air attacks on the Russian Federation? Write it into the comments, I will enjoy reading them. Otherwise, I will end the video here. Thank you for watching. If you find the video informative, then please hit the like and subscribe button. And otherwise, take care. I will see you next time.